Okay, it is Wednesday, January the 20th, and it's about 8:33 p.m. And welcome to week three. Week three. This is the halfway point. Starting next week, we go into the second half and of Introduction to Corrections. And you know my name now, Professor Richard Wright. I want to first of all start out by saying that I feel pretty good today. Um, I'm just happy about today. I've been all day paying attention to what's been going on in DC. I'm happy about two things. Number one, that there was no disruption or violence as threatened. And then secondly, I'm happy about the new start. Those of you who are my friends on Facebook, you'll see I posted a song. Anybody who saw the movie The Wiz, song Brand New Day. Anyway, if you go on Facebook, or if you are not my friend on Facebook, you could send me a request, Richard Wright JD, and then you can see it. But I'm very happy. I'm very excited about what is going on, about how I think things are going to get better with everything. So I don't know what everybody's politics are, but mine is based upon what has been going on the last 4 years. I'm not happy about it. It cuts against the things even that we stand for as professors, as teachers, and even at this school. There was an attack on diversity. The diversity was not good and it was un-American. But as you know, this is one of our transferable skills, and we constantly talk about it. So hopefully things will get better for us. But I can tell you this already, that there's going to be young people like yourselves that are going to be the future in criminal justice. And remember what I said at the beginning of the course. I produce ethical, professional, and educated. Ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice professionals. And then last night I did something, and I'm going to do it again tonight, keeping in mind that there are over 400,000 people who were with us last year. Early in the year, they're not with us anymore because of the pandemic, and the president, when he was president-elect, and vice president-elect, who's now vice president, did a session at the Lincoln Memorial or the Washington Memorial, one of the two, where they you saw all those flags representing each person who passed on because of the virus. And so I last night had a moment of silence, and I'm going to do it again tonight. You can pray if you want, you can meditate, you can do whatever, but it's silent, not out loud. So I'm going to take a few seconds to give you that opportunity before we get started, and then we'll get started. Okay. I say amen because I prayed, but that's in respect, out of respect. I'm sure each and every one of you know someone who the coronavirus has affected. And I got people in my family. Matter of fact, I have somebody right now that is battling now, and we'll know more in the next 24 hours And so anyway, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Try not to get too emotional about what I know that's happening with one of my sisters. She's on a ventilator now while I'm speaking to you. So it's pretty challenging, but I will make it through. Yeah, because of adversity is the springboard to success. You know about that. So here's our lectures. And actually in this class, we have just 2 more lectures. As you know, there is no week 6 lecture. So we got this week, we got week 4, and we got week 5. Week 5, we will be done with lectures. Week 5, I'll talk about the assignments for week 6, which are important for me to cover because there's no lecture. So I will have the recording for week 3 here at the bottom. I want you to take note and pay attention to the calendar. Course calendar. And I want to tell you guys something about your assignments that I've graded. So anyway, so here's your announcements or have the details on it. Your role of prisoners, punishment, and programming. The initial post was due yesterday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on states, prisons, programming. Then our lecture today. Then your reply post is due Saturday. And then your assignments for Sunday. Sentencing fact sheet. We'll talk about that. The quiz, which you guys are all familiar with, that you have 3 opportunities to do before the week is over. And then finally, your live classroom lecture. Now, note this. I'm getting ready to do. If you see today is the 20th, next week will be the 27th. And I want to show you something. Here we go. Notice that what happens when we get to February. So we got one more, the 27th, and then the 3rd. That's it for the lecture. But the class ends absolutely on the 9th. I say this every week, and I do it over and over because inevitably there are students who come to me and submit assignments like at 12:01, 12 o'clock. I can't help you. I'm sorry. They won't let me because the quarter absolutely ends on that day. As a matter of fact, you should be aware that the quarter ends on that 9th. And then if any of you are in term 2 and you're taking introduction to criminal law or drugs and crime, chances are you'll see me starting that week as well for the new quarter. So be cognizant of this. Pay close attention. Time is running out. Okay. Now, having said that, I want to go back to the course homepage and let's go to the announcement. The roles of prisons, punishment, and programming. I sent you the PowerPoints previously on chapters 4 and 14. Did you guys get the PowerPoints? Type and let me know in the chat box. I'll see it. Did you get them? Okay. Okay. I only saw 2 people respond, so So I'm presuming that everybody got it. So use those again, as I said, to help you prepare for your quiz, along with the stuff we talk about tonight and the materials in the module, that the activities, institutional programming, changing philosophies, core rehabilitative programs, determinate and indeterminate sentencing, and vocabulary review. Of course, that's one of the big ones. Your discussion assignment is state's prison program. And again, I shared that with you. Your initial post, as I said, was due last night, and your reply post due Saturday. Finally, complete the written assignment, sentencing fact sheet, and then you know the quiz, and then you know my motto, what that is all about. So let's get into the assignments themselves in the module. Let's go to module 3, prisons, punishments, and programming. The discussion post, as I said before, it involves yourself putting yourself in as a board member of your state's commission dealing with your state's prison programming. So you're going to conduct an online search of your state's prison programming, and then you're going to post, for your initial post, a short description of the type of prison programs that are available, the goals and purpose of the programs, thoughts as to which are effective and why, and include indicators as to whether or not they are effective. Reduce recidivism, which we'll talk about tonight. I think I've talked about that a lot, though, in this course. Efficient and other things like that. How efficient is it? Does it work? Your recommendations for additional programming and why, and then in your reply post, respond to a student from another state. Okay? Now let's talk about the written assignment. Sentencing fact sheet. So there are two types of sentencing that occur in criminal cases. There's indeterminate and determinate sentencing. And we're going to talk a little bit about each, just a little bit. And so you are going to prepare a fact sheet, which is almost like a flyer, and giving people a chance to know on one side of the paper is determinate, other side is indeterminate. Doesn't matter which one is left, which one is right. And then, so you're going to create this sheet letting voters know what these types of sentences are, and you're going to research that. So it's going to be a one-page fact sheet. I will be running those papers through Grammarly, as I always do. And your requirement is 4 bullet points. Define determinate and indeterminate sentencing, and some examples of each of the types. And then explain at least 2 pros and 2 cons of each one. Providing credible sources. Now, I'm going to tell you right now. Oh, then I'll finish this. Provide stated ideas with professional language, spelling, grammar. So it's APA. And then this tells you how to do the brochure. It has to be a Word document. Now, let's go to the rubric. View the rubric. All right, I'm going to ask. Yeah. Always, for all written assignments, there should always be a cover page. And then there should be citations and references. When I say APA, that's it. As soon as you hear me say APA, those are some of the requirements in Roman 12. Okay, the font. All right. So always, you don't even have to ask me unless I tell you otherwise. Now, I'm going to ask each of you, which of these columns do I want you to focus on? The one on the far right, or the one on the far left, or the ones in the middle? Type it in. Let me see. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm waiting for one more answer. There are two of you. I think you should know this, that I ask questions for a number of reasons. Number one, I make sure that there are people, and I've had students who are guilty of this, they'll log in and then they just stay logged in, but they're not in the class. That's not good. So I hope that's not happening. That's why I ask periodically, and then I see how many people are here, and I'm not getting responses from everybody. So um, unless there's a technical problem, I should see responses from everybody. Okay, mastery is the column. I said pretend that these other three do not exist. Okay, very important. Very important. And you should always look at that. And if you look at them, you'll see what it tells you for the sentencing types. How many sentencing types are there? How many sentencing types are there? How many? You don't have to tell me what they are, just tell me how many. Okay, actually, okay. What are the sentencing types? Only one student answered me. What are the sentencing types? Nobody knows? What are the sentencing types? What are the sentencing types? Well, think about it in the context of this assignment. What are the sentencing types in terms of this assignment? That's one. What's the other one? Let's go back. What are the sentencing types for this assignment? They're not fines, they're not parole. There's only two: indeterminate and determinate. Remember, we're talking about determinate or indeterminate sentencing. Remember, I'm talking about this assignment. So not those others that you said. So let's go back to the rubric. So then it tells you the sentencing types, 20 points. Exemplary description of the sentencing type with thorough details on the elements of each type with credible sources. Determinate and indeterminate sentencing. Pros and cons of each sentencing type. Once again, you're only dealing with these. And actually, to be honest with you, those other things you mentioned, they're really not technically sentencing types. Okay? There's only two sentencing types. And sentencing type is what the your state uses to sentence a person. And that sentence is not probation, parole, and definitely not parole. Parole is something later after you go to prison. Probation, no, it doesn't fit. But it is a way of disposing of a case. Okay? But when we talk about sentencing types in the context of this assignment, it told you in the material in the assignment that this is regarding determinate and indeterminate sentencing. That's what your mind is supposed to be on. So the pros and cons of each type, because you can get trapped by using some of those others and you'll get a 0. Notice every section, credible sources. And then you got your spelling, typos, and remember what I said, APA. So credible sources. If you don't have credible sources, look what's going to happen. And this is where some of you students have messed up in some of the assignments that I've graded. The ones for week 1. The weeks 2, I'm going to be grading before Friday, the end of Friday. You've got to have citations in the body. And many of you don't do that. And you always end up over and emerging. Notice what it says. If you're even going to get competence, you have to have minimal with credible sources. Proficiency is a little more than that, but this is perfect. This one, missing details on specific elements of each type from credible sources, means you have no credible sources. So if you have no credible sources, you know what's going to happen? Every section is going to end up with, you're going to get 32 points. 32 points. You don't want to get 32 points. Okay? You want to get all of the points. 32 points out of 60. That's failing. And I can't help you because I stress this all the time. And so for your assignments, you've got to make sure that you have that. And I said this earlier, it's very important that you get into the habit of supporting your statements with sources. I do it. I'm in the habit of doing that. I require it as a lawyer. If the judge says, well, where do you get that information from? I say, from section whatever, whatever, whatever. Or people versus so-and-so, so-and-so. And you're going to have to get used to doing that. If you're not a lawyer, you're still going to have to do it in papers that you might have to prepare or sources. When you do research, provide. And remember what we said, academic integrity. Cite your sources in the body and then reference page. So you don't have to ask me that. All right. Any questions about the sentencing fact sheet assignment? Yes or no? Type in the chat box. Okay. So I take it nobody else has any questions. Okay. Uh, 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 there's no example. The example is for you to provide on one side details about determinate sentencing, on another side indeterminate sentencing, and to provide sources from research. I mean, I don't know how clear I can get. The sentencing types, I told you, but what you have to do is thoroughly describe them with reliable sources. Pros and cons of determinate and indeterminate sentencing with credible sources. That's what you got to do. You don't need that. I don't know what I can, how much I can tell you. On one side, you're going to have determinate. On the other side, you've seen flyers before where you've gotten and you're going to vote on something, what's good, you know, what about certain things on the left, certain things on the right. That's what you're going to do. You don't, sometimes students are guilty of not using the critical thinking ability that you have, and I know you can do it, but I don't spoon feed my students. I can tell you I won't do it. So that question is a question that is answered by the assignment itself. That's why I asked you, what are the sentencing types? And then some of you went off into other stuff, but you didn't think about what the module says the assignment is about: determinate and indeterminate sentence. That's all. The pros and cons of it. Okay? And that's what you got to do. It's a one-page fact. And by the way, don't give me like a little bitty thing of information. Break it, give me some adequate information. If I'm going to read about it, I'm not going to read two types of examples or something real short. That's what happens, unfortunately, when students submit it. But you've got to do that way. One of the things about me is that you will definitely learn is I'm tough, but I try to make myself extremely clear if I have to go over it 2 or 3 times. So the key thing is that this paper is all about determinate versus indeterminate sentencing and the details of each of them, how they operate, what they are, what they do, and then pros and cons of each sentencing type. What do you think is good about it? What do you think is bad about each of the types? And with credible sources. That means you got to do some research. And then your spelling, grammar, and mechanics. Okay? Is everybody ready now with understanding where we are with this assignment? Okay. All right. Sometimes I get kind of like one of my students says, Professor, sometimes you sound almost like a parent. I said, I am a parent. And if you're a coach on a team, you talk to the players. And if I talk to my students, I'm trying to help you to become a good professional. One of the first things is, that's why I said there's good listening skills. We talked about this in my class last night in contemporary issues of criminal justice. And as a criminal justice professional person, you got to be able to listen, and you got to be able to follow instructions that are given for your assignment. So when your boss gives you an assignment, you got to make sure that you totally understand it. Don't overthink stuff. That's one of the things that traps people all the time. I remember when I was in law school and I'm gonna move on. The judge, who was my mentor, who was also my professor in trial advocacy, he said one of the worst offenses that you can have is not to use your God-given common sense and stop and think about what an assignment or what it is your goal that you're trying to accomplish. So your goal that you're trying to accomplish here is educate people about determinate and indeterminate sentencing. That's it. No more and no less. So it's very important. Very, very, very important. But I'm telling you, your grades for week 2 will be in, but this is week 3. So if you're in part of that group and you haven't provided credible sources, and remember, don't use Wikipedia ever. Use credible sources. We talked about information literacy as one of our transferable skills. Very, very, very important. Okay, so I'm gonna move on because I don't want to spend the whole session talking about the assignments and won't be able to get into the topic itself. All right, so now the next thing after that is your quiz, as you already know, and I told you I would highly recommend that you don't just try to take it, wing it. Each time I take it, I wouldn't have studied it beforehand. And remember, the highest grade is what's going to count. So let's say, for example, if you timed out in number 1 and you have to take number 2, you don't have to tell me a message. I had to take it 2 times or 3 times. You don't tell me. The system picks it up automatically because you have 3 opportunities to do it. And it says what it does at the last sentence. Highest attempt is recorded. Okay. And then you agree not to have notes, papers, or any of those things while you're doing this assignment. Then the live classroom lecture, I'll give you a key phrase or word at the end. All right, so let's get into the topic of roles, punishments, and programming. So we're going to deal with these areas here. Pay close attention to all of them, but especially when we get to 3. So here's the deal. You have heard me talk about these 2 topics since the beginning of this course. When penitentiaries or prisons started, the key thing was to punish people, was to take them out of the freedom that they had because they did something wrong. And so people were isolated. The prison system consisted of barbaric little rooms that people were kept in and were let out periodically. And so it was thought that after that, they treated it like a timeout with nothing else taking place. And then at the end of that period, you were released, or you were early released for parole. The point of the matter is that you filled your time and you were released. With no education, no training, or any of those things. Okay? So now today's prisons deal with safety and security and the offenders and the staff. And there's a debate on how to do this in the best way. So it depends on which programming and how it's delivered. Now, you could see that when you punish someone, look what it says here. If you're a correction professional and you believe in punishment, you see your job as directing, challenging, confronting, and belittling the offender, putting them down. Some people even use foul language. And that the individual is there strictly as punishment. And that's all the staff would focus on, and then the person's released. So it's been determined that rehabilitation is the best method. It's the method now. Because what is happening is that, and that's why you guys are in college now, it used to be, and moving away from, the hiring of correction officers right out of high school. And you had to have a high school diploma. And so as a result, you came in, remember the people were already in there because they did something wrong, or is believed they did something wrong. I'm not talking about the wrongful conviction people. Let's just assume that they did do something wrong. And so you're there as a gatekeeper, and then you do everything to help that person stay out of trouble, and then they go out. Well, you should be aware that while they are in there, they're learning from other individuals who are in there, who've been in there before them, and maybe even lifers who have nothing to lose, and they pick up bad habits. So by focusing on punishment, then it's quite clear that you see that there needs to be another alternative, and that's rehabilitation. But let's go take the steps to look at what we happen here. So we talk about what we call EBP, or evidence-based practices: skill need assessment, case planning, cognitive interventions, skill-directed practices. And so this EBP takes the position that is possible, it says, and punishment is not part of their role. Did you hear me? You become more of a counselor. That the goal of punishment is accomplished by just putting them in prison, locking up the door, throw away the keys, feed them, those kind of things. As long as they stay out of trouble, they're good. However, looking at something like restorative justice. Now, the name tells you restorative, restore, restoration. It's a belief that individuals need to be pointed in another direction. And so it helps victims as well as offenders and the community overall. Why? Because remember, people are not going to be locked up forever. And when they're released, you don't want them bitter and angry. You want them to be rehabilitated or changed or head in a new direction. You all remember do you remember, did I tell you guys in this class, I'm sure I did, about my clock thing where 12 o'clock and you do a 180 and you get to 6 o'clock? You guys remember that? Yes. So with rehabilitation, you take them from 12 to 6, and then they stay on 6 and don't go to 7, because then you're starting to head back the wrong way. You can't go back, but what you do is you find yourself back around right where you started. That's why we tell people don't do a 360, do a 180. And so it's been determined that this is a method. And then look at what happens. The glue that holds this together is restorative justice, restoring individuals. And we're going to get more specific about that in a second. Notice that it hits the victim, the offender, and the community. Okay? Overall. So here's the deal. The idea is to get the person in a mindset so that they can come out, change, head in a new direction, rehabbed. Anybody know the term? You know the term people talking about, oh, I'm a rehabber, and you're talking about houses. Well, what you're doing is you're gutting that house and taking out the old stuff and replacing it with more modern and newer stuff, and then you might sell it. Well, this is what you're trying to do as correction officers. So therefore, you're not just a person who's a jailer. And so what you're doing, and notice what the title is. It's correction officers. So how do you correct something best? By punishment or rehabilitation? We already know the answer to that based on what I said. And I'm noticing that that's the way that a lot of people that are more educated are learning to operate. Okay? And so it's very, 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 very important that we use restorative justice. We do things to restore individuals. Okay? So now here are some things that can help to do that. The rehabilitative programs. And it operates operates on a combination of group treatment, cognitive skill building, behavior and social therapies, education and vocational programs, substance abuse, sex offender, and religion. And so what happens is that what we want to do is we want to take individuals, we want to introduce them to a better way of thinking and give them and get in their heads, that's the cognitive part, so that they will understand that it is better to make good choices than bad choices, because bad choices result in recidivism or repeat offenders. And so we provide education. I always say it is cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. I've shared before in my other classes. I'd worked on a program with a judge, the same judge I was talking about earlier, who told us about common sense, Judge R. Eugene Pencham, my mentor. He was a criminal court judge in the Layton Courthouse, one of our main courthouses in Cook County. And he came up with this program with his probation officer called Probation Challenge. And you can Google and check it out. And I was a board member of Probation Challenge, but I started out working with them. And the theory is that if individuals, and by the way, it is on the books in the state of Illinois, because one of our board members was a state senator, Brookins was his name, Howard Brookins. And so the philosophy was that if you came before the judge and you had a nonviolent offense and you had not obtained your GED or your high school diploma, put it that way, he would offer you the opportunity to go through the probation challenge program at a junior college called Olive Harvey in Chicago in the far south side. And you would take classes to get your GED. If you got your GED, you came back before the judge and the charges would be dismissed. You didn't even have to go and do anything else. They were dismissed. Now, we learned that individuals who went into that program, some of them went on and stayed at Olive Harvey because it was a junior college and got their associates. And some went on to four-year institutions, and at least one that we know went on and became a lawyer. So my point is that their cognitive thinking was more towards the knowledge that they attain and those types of things. The other thing that helps in terms of this is vocational training. because some people aren't. That's why they have vocational schools, because some people are not college bound people. They need trades like mechanics or carpenters or electricians or barbers, which is, by the way, is a trade that they learn. And now people get licensed to learn how to cut hair, do beautician license in prison now. And so these vocational programs are given to give individuals a chance to find another method. Should they have a substance abuse problem, that is addressed also, whether it's drugs, excuse me, or alcohol, because it's common knowledge that individuals commit crimes on a large scale to support their drug habits. And so therefore, if you lock a person up again, you can even educate them. But if they have a substance abuse problem and you don't address it, it's not going to help. It's just like telling a person that has COVID-19 to just wash their hands and those things, and they got it already. They already got it, and then they try to wash their hands and believe that it's going to just go away. Take showers. You got to take care of that, and then you get immunized now with the vaccines now that are out here, that are forthcoming for all of us. Soon I'll be in that group, because I am in the group in Illinois. It's just a matter of time, because I'm 70. But the point of the matter is that is an illness. Substance abuse, that's why we have deflection. You may not know about deflection yet, but you'll learn about it when you take drugs and crime. I'll talk about deflection. But basically, just a little tease of it, is that there are programs now being set up by law enforcement agencies across the country, and it's been determined that law enforcement officers can be counselors, and if a person comes to the station with drugs and alcohol and stuff like that on them, rather than to lock them up, they confiscate the contraband and then direct them to social programs to help them, which is a good thing. So substance abuse programs, if a person is a pedophile or a sex offender, again, these are illnesses that need to be treated. And then religious programs are generally used because of faith beliefs. Now, faith-based organization, and it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs. I'm a Christian, but I have friends who are Muslims, and I also have people who actually are Jewish, and they operate on that. I worked for a big Jewish law firm. I know all about the understanding about what that's all about. But the point of the matter is that you have something that is greater than you that can help you to deal with the issues. Again, I talk about that in prison. I mean, in prison, in drugs and crime. So through using what we call the RNR, the risk, need, responsibility reminds us that criteria must be implemented, and that there must be some programming. And so we begin to look at some of the factors that are involved, like the history of the individual, their attitudes, behavior, how they're affected by peers, which a lot of times, what the personality of that person. So these are things that they look at to help determine how to help in core rehabilitative programs. And then secondary are the things I just got through talking about: education, having ties to family, substance abuse, dealing with leisure and recreation, and these types of things. So, and that shows how they work hand in hand. The highest risk recidivate. they become recidivists because they're not given anything to replace what got them there in the first place. The needs that they have need to be addressed, and you need to. They're basically reprogrammed and give them a new start. Takes them from 12 to 6. Okay, and then these are some things that you get into the details of it. About the need to address how people think, how they operate, and things of that nature. But it says all rehabilitative programming, whether it's sex offender, substance abuse, or education, focus on changing thinking. That's what I've been talking about for the last so many minutes, and deals with cognitive skill building, training that mind to think good things, and so that their behavior will change. So to give them a new mind, a new start. Okay. Finally, it says here, summing up everything that I just said, it says research helps us understand the importance of evidence-based programming that we just talked about as a means of enhancing safety and security in our prisons. This is not yet a national consensus because people are still catching on to it. The adoption of evidence-based practices and the importance of dealing with the mind. It says, hey, wait, we got these people in jail here. They're bad people. Well, I think not necessarily bad people. They are just people who made bad choices and made bad decisions. And so what we want to do is redirect that. Okay. So now let's talk about something that I spent time earlier talking about. Okay. Punishment, as it says, is the cornerstone of correction. What that means is that there's a type of sentencing, and each of the states and the federal system deal with them. And they deal with what we call determinate sentencing. Oh, incidentally, please do me a favor. Resist the temptation to use this as citing your source for your papers. I want you to do some research. You can use it as a starting point because this actually determinate sentencing, and it describes it. It describes it here in each of these bullet points. And the state legislatures in your jurisdiction decide which one is best. So determinate sentencing, just let me share with you real quick. I know all about these because in 1977, the first major change of the Illinois Criminal Code took place with truth in sentencing. And I did my senior research paper and worked with legislators on what they call House Bill 1500. And I worked with Jim Bagley, who was the general counsel attorney, and some of the legislators, Representative George Sangmeyer and Sangmeister, or Meyer and Sangmeister, and some other names. If you do research, you'll know what I'm talking about. And we determined that people should receive greater sentences commensurate with the crime that they commit. And their time should be better determined with that, kind of taking the judge's position and minimizing it so that the judge would be given a guideline by the state legislature as to how to sentence a person. So therefore, in 1977, we went from indeterminate sentencing to determinate sentencing. Now, so that's what we have now in our state. So those of you who are in Illinois, I just gave you a nugget, but you got to research it. Then, so indeterminate sentencing, 3 bullet points, takes rehabilitation. Now, with determinate sentencing, I'm going to tell you how rehabilitation might take place. Is that one of the things that we look at in sentencing, in determinate sentencing, is what we call aggravating and mitigating circumstances. If you've been paying attention to what happened with some of the individuals who were charged in the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, there's been at least 2 attorneys on the news. I watch the news a lot, especially CNN, and there have been 2 attorneys representing 2 of the individuals. And the defense that the attorneys were each using was that President Trump told them to do that, and that's why they did it, believing as commander-in-chief. Well, first of all, they weren't military. Some of them had military background. But here's my point. That is not a defense. Because I had clients who were gang members and were told by gang leaders to go and shoot somebody. But that didn't exonerate them. But what happens is that what that is used for, those individuals in that insurrection, were really talking about what we call mitigation. Mitigation mitigates the circumstances of the possible sentence. So the period of time that you serve might be less because we have an aggravation and mitigation part of our sentencing hearing that takes place when a person is sentenced. And so therefore we look at how that person responded. And so it's kind of including rehabilitation and it's taken into consideration. But with indeterminate sentencing, that's taken in and straight up for how long a person might be in custody or might not, or be sentenced. And it's not easy to calculate because it says difficult to calculate because depending on the number of beds, because as we know, prisons are overcrowded, because of the date of release of an offender is not known. So they're given a range of period as opposed to a certain time or a certain amount of time that they have to serve before they qualify to be released. That fits indeterminate. But if you are released when they feel like you have shown that you have learned your lesson, that's with indeterminate sentencing. Release decision lies with the parole authority and the parole board rather than the legislature giving the parole board the amount of time that a person must serve under determinate sentencing before they are released. So those are just some of the things that operate. All right. So now, usually people characterize indeterminate sentencing as more like a slap on the wrist or less time. It is because of indeterminate sentencing that the guy that killed my parents, and if you listen to my story, you'll understand, only served 3.5 years. It's because of indeterminate sentencing. Not for killing my dad, but when he killed my mom. Sentenced to 10 years, but 10 meant 5. And for good behavior, he served 3.5. It's because it was indeterminate. But if he had determinate sentencing, he'd have had a wider range. And so that's what I mean there. Okay. So now I'm going to wrap up here before I go over the vocabulary review with you by asking you to tell me, as I put my mouse on these 6 points. The release decision based on determination that an individual has been rehabilitated goes under which column? Determinate or indeterminate? Yeah, because it actually says it up here. Issues with disparity. Which one? There you go. It doesn't fit over there. Right. Issues with disparity. You have to understand that word disparity and how it applies. A fixed sentence utilizing sensing guidelines. Disparities dealing with gender and race are eliminated. Yep. Offender is automatically released once that sentence is served. And then, of course, a range of time that includes, remember I already told you, minimum, maximum. Yeah. And so there you go. So that gives you a summary of how it works. All right. So now the vocabulary review, and of course I show you how this works. This is what you need to make sure that this is actually like a practice exam for your quiz. Start the quiz. And you're going to match these together. And you got, okay, indeterminate and determinate sentences are depending on, wait a minute, I think indeterminate and determinate sentences are dependent on the state's law. Yeah, remember I said each state has its own method. And I said that, yeah, Illinois went from indeterminate to determinate. Okay. Most of the states that you guys are in, I pretty much know which are which. I gave you Illinois because that's the one I'm in. Are any of you guys in Illinois? Any of you guys tonight with me? I don't think so. I think some of you guys in Wisconsin and Minnesota, right? Yeah, I knew some of you. Yeah, a lot of my students are in Minnesota. Elijah, where are you? Minnesota. So everybody's Minnesota. Okay. So I already know the answer to that question, but I'm not telling you. All right. So you can you were in Chicago last weekend, trying to get away from the snow and stuff up there. Well, we had some. Oh, so you're the one that brought the snow here. Okay. All right. Let me see. You just failed the class. Oh, it followed you there. Okay. Did did you take it back with you? Actually, that's funny. I have family up there in Minneapolis, Hennepin County. That's the biggest county out there, right? Hennepin. Yeah, Hennepin. You guys know Hennepin County, right? Yeah. Okay. My cousins, that's where they are. They're in Minneapolis area. St. Paul, I think, is also Hennepin County. It's like Cook here, big. But anyway, he always let us know, man, it's cold up here. Put on 2 and 3 uh, pairs of pants just to take out the garbage. So anyway, I'm not going to go over these, but you're going to go over and you're going to look at these, and then you're going to match these because you're going to have to know these for your exam. Okay. So I'm not going to go over them because we're kind of running a little bit behind. So each one of these you want to do. All right. All right. So that's all I got. Any questions? Okay. All right, I'm going to give you a key phrase then. Restorative justice. Give me that spelled. Restorative justice. Make sure you spell it right. Restorative justice. And you'll get your points for this week. All right, remember everything I said about your assignments. Make sure, that, and if you've already, some people's already started on it, it's not too late to do it again. Before I grade them, and I usually, even if I grade them, they're not due until Sunday, but generally I try not to grade them until you get close to the end of the week. So that's why I'm working on week 2 now, and today is Wednesday, and by the end of Friday I have your grades in for your written assignments. I already did discussion posts, and then the quiz, of course, that automatically goes in. Okay, good night everybody, stay safe, and stay positive and focused, and get your assignments done. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them. I won't fuss at you if I have to repeat something that I've already said here, but sometimes, though, there are students that come to me and they'll ask me a question and I know I covered it in the lecture, but they're not one of the students that came to the lecture, and I say to them, go listen to the lecture and then come back if you need. Most time they don't come back, because there are students who try to get the information from me. But no, I've been teaching too long for that one. Okay. All right. Don't stop trying to learn shortcuts. Get things done. Do have a system. Learn. That's why I focus on the right side of your rubric as opposed to those left columns. Don't even think about those. All right, good night. See you next week.